Chapter 18. Fall of the Cities of the Plain. Sodom, a massive city built upon one of the most fertile valleys in all the Near East. The city's outer double walls were so strong that no host had a hope of taking the city by force. The Elamites had only succeeded by slaughtering the armies of the cities of the plain, and, having gotten the victory, demanded the capitulation of the city. The white walls of Sodom rose up in stark contrast to the verdant green of the valley and the dark brown granite of the distant mountains. It was only fitting that the most wicked place in all the world, this side of the great deluge, would be on the shores of the lowest point on earth. Like a drain, it caught all the filth and corruption of the present age. The rumors that Eleazar had brought back with him were less than half of the full wickedness that was on display in this city, as well as in Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela in the north. In fact, so great was the rumor of their evil that people refused to trade with them in their cities. The Sodomites didn't care, for they had wealth enough, and to spare, to perpetrate not only their city and its maintenance, but also the licentious lifestyle with which they carried themselves. As part of their wicked custom of robbing, assaulting, and even molesting travelers who came to their fair city, they would post watchmen at the gates to the city to declare whenever a stranger entered therein. Lot was such a watchman. Initially, he had lived in tents, as his uncle had lived. But when the Elamites came and he was taken captive, things changed. Instead of remaining outside the walls of the city, he sold his cattle and herds and bought for himself a modest estate within the city proper. For the next 2 decades, he saw the depravity of the city firsthand and became intimately acquainted with its wickedness. Yet he said nothing. Though he admired the bravery and faith of his uncle, who he knew not was now called Abraham, he was still betaken to the spirit of sloth, which caused him to hesitate when Abram told him to leave his camp. More than this, he and Otto had grown quite accustomed to the life in the lap of luxury. The watchman had his post on the eastern gate of the city, that which looked towards the Sea of Salt. Before the great gate was a tall ziggurat, in like fashion to the one that Nimrod had built on the plain of Shinar. Opposite that was the statue of a great monster. It bore the face of Queen Bera, but everything from the waist down had the body of a lion crouched upon the ground. Lot's post was in a small structure built into a flying buttress on the inner part of the city wall, with a narrow window looking out on the east. In the distance, he could see 2 figures walking down from the north, making their way towards the city's eastern gate. The hour was late, and Lot's curiosity got the best of him. People didn't just come to Sodom, especially on account of its reputation. Perhaps there was some reason for their arrival, which he might ascertain for himself if he ingratiated himself to them. At any rate, his uncle's penchant for hospitality had rubbed off on him, and he hoped to take them into his house privately, and so keep them from the terrible fate of the sojourners in Sodom. Therefore, he marked their approach, even as the eastern sky grew dark, and the sun began to disappear behind the high mountains in the west. Just as the light began to fade and darkness descended upon the valley, Lot walked out from his post and made his way towards the silhouettes of the 2 men. "Hail, my lords!" Lot greeted them. He took a knee and prostrated himself to the ground twice for both. "Welcome to the great city of Sodom. If you would be ruled by me, come now, I pray you, into your servant's house." "Nay," the taller of the 2 strangers said to Lot, "but we shall abide in the streets this night." "No!" Lot interjected, rising from his prostrate position and stretching his arms wide. He looked as though he was protecting the strangers from the city. No. It's not safe. That is to say, I shouldn't be saying this, but it is not prudent to abide in the streets of Sodom at night." "Is it not?" the shorter figure asked. "Will they not take us in?" Lot chuckled. "You're clearly not from around here, and have never heard of Sodom if you ask such questions. Please, stay with me this night. I have food and drink and water to wash. In the morning, you may rise early and Be about your business. Only do not stay in the streets this night. I beg you." The strangers were silent for a moment, and then the taller one spoke. "As you have said, so shall it be." Good, good, good," Lot exclaimed, bowing to each of them again. "Now quickly, come with me. We must enter the city in secret." He led the strangers over to the side of the great Sphinx, where they might be hidden for the present from sight. Once they were behind the stone monster, Lot led them quickly to the northern half of the eastern gate, telling them to stick fast to the wall and be as quiet as possible. He peered around the corner of the gate and waited for a moment, where there was a commotion. A public orgy was happening, and all eyes were feasting on the illicit act, hoping to get a piece of the action if they could. Lot then had the strangers hold each other's hand, while he took the hand of the tall one, and hurried around the corner of the gate and into his gatehouse. In the light of the little lamp inside Lot's gatehouse, he could see the two strangers a bit more clearly. The tall one had a long, thick beard, while the shorter one was clean-shaven like a woman. "We made it," Lot whispered. "We should lie low for a while, until the crowds disperse. Then we'll depart with them." "As you say," the taller stranger replied. "But I do not see the point of the subterfuge. We have an important message for the city." "Whatever your message is, it's not worth losing your lives," Lot replied. "How would we lose our lives?" the clean-faced one asked Lot. "The city is not very hospitable," Lot began. "No, actually that's putting it very mildly. Hospitality is outlawed, on pain of death." "Why?" the tall bearded one asked. "They believe that strangers come only to Sodom to steal their wealth, so they've outlawed all hospitality. Strangers unfortunate to come into the city are better off dying in the wilderness." "How can you say that?" the clean-faced one asked. "You will see soon enough," Lot said. He peered out from between the flying buttress. "It looks like the crowds are dispersing. Keep your hoods down and follow me. Don't speak to anyone else but me, and only in hushed tones. Come!" Lot led the two of them out of the little gatehouse and entered the streets of the city. They moved quietly, carefully, not to attract any attention as they went. As they walked, the fragrance of oil of myrrh was detected in the air as they passed two men making a deal in the city gates. The younger stranger turned to look at the transaction, but Lot stepped between the stranger and the two men. "This is best not for us to get involved in," he said. "What are they doing?" the clean-faced stranger asked. "The one man has rubbed oil of myrrh on those silver coins," Lot explained. "He's giving them to the other man as a pretext to robbing him blind." "How can they accomplish this?" the clean-faced one asked. "Once the second man has the silver in a safe place in his house," Lot continued, "the first man and any he can bribe or cajole into breaking in with him will break into the second man's house and take everything they can find." As they were speaking, a fight was breaking out as a group of men and women were dragging an old man onto a richly adorned rug lying against one side of the street. He appeared to be too short for the rug as they laid him down upon it. So 3 men took his arms and 3 women took his legs, and they began to stretch him out as though on a rack. The poor man cried out in pain while his tormentors only mocked him and pulled harder at his limbs until they broke from his body. "We must help him." "No," Lot replied, stepping between the scene of carnage and the tall stranger. "Are you insane?" asked the bearded stranger. "That man needs help." "There's nothing we can do for him," Lot replied. "He's in their hands." Lot sighed, his eyes watering as he spoke. "You wanted to know why I wouldn't let you stay in the streets? There's your answer. Strangers come to Sodom and see those beds laid out on the side of the streets and sleep in them. And who do so may as well use a chopping block for a pillow." "And this is a common occurrence?" the bearded one asked. "A regular occurrence," Lot corrected. "Are there no magistrates to bring these criminals to justice?" Lot chuckled. "Justice? There is no justice in Sodom. The judges rule as they please, showing partiality to the rich, even when he is clearly at fault. These roving bands of vagabonds do this at the express commands of Sharek, Queen Bera's chief magistrate. How cruel to show no mercy to the stranger within your gates, the bearded man exclaimed. It's worse than that, I'm afraid, Lot added. If there is a beggar in the city, they will give him only gold and silver and not food. These have little value in Sodom, seeing as how they're so abundant. The poor wretch soon starves to death, and they avail themselves of his belongings. At this, Lot paused and reached up to wipe the tears that were spilling out of his eyes. My eldest daughter, Peltith, lost her life on account of this, he sobbed. She remembered my Uncle Abram's hospitality, and when she saw one such beggar begging for food, would secret him bread every time she passed him by on her way home from the well. The Sodomites couldn't fathom how the wretch wasn't dead, so they washed him in secret and found out my daughter's charity. They burned her alive in the city square before the queen and all the people. They even forced me and my wife to watch it happen. The bearded man placed a hand of comfort on Lot's shoulder as he wept. Forgive me, my lords, he said. I do not mean to lose myself. I still have a tender heart for my daughter. But I shouldn't be so soft. Sodom is a hard place. Just then there was a loud cry as another orgy erupted. This time between several men and a goat. Abominable! The clean-faced one gasped as the carryings on. That's nothing, Lot dismissed. One can see these things, and 100 worse, day and night in Sodom, sometimes even free of charge. How can you be so relaxed about this debased wickedness? The clean-faced one asked. You think that's bad? Lot asked. During the summer festival in the valley, the lords of the city hunt little boys and girls like wild animals. Once they're caught, they commit all manner of debased abominations with them. Not even the women of the city have any scruples about this. Queen Bera proudly boasts of the number of boys and girls she has personally molested on the last summer's hunt. The clean-faced stranger gasped aloud, covering his mouth with his hand. They have festivals every year for the pairing of children as young as 3 years of age with older men and women, Lot stated. Not to mention men with men, women with women, or men and women with beasts of every conceivable kind. They treat the animals with as much contempt as they treat strangers. This is hard to believe, the bearded man exclaimed. Well, that's the reality of the world we live in, Lot stated. Now, we really must be going. If we linger here any longer, we'll draw a crowd. They continued their way silently and swiftly through the streets of Sodom. While Lot insisted on haste, the strangers gaped in disgusted awe at every orgy, assault, theft, and outright public murder that they saw as they went on their way. Every time they would pause to behold, Lot placed his hand upon their shoulders and urged them to hurry on their way before they attracted the unwanted attention of the mobs. By and by they made their way through the steadily darkening streets until they came to a modest estate. Not quite as large as the house of Terah and Ur, but more exalted than the tents of Abraham. Up the flight of steps they went from the street, and Lot knocked upon the door. A portal was opened, and a single gray eye peered out from the other side. Otto, it's me, Lot said. Open this door. The portal closed, and the sounds of many locks being opened clinked and clanked from the other side. Lot looked this way and that nervously, eyeing the streets and alleyways for any watchers. He was eager to put a door between him and the city streets. As he had indeed said, it was better to die of thirst and starvation in the wilderness than to be benighted in Sodom. At last the door opened, and Lot ushered the strangers into the room. Who are these with you, Lot? Otto demanded. Wait, woman, Lot hissed. Wait until we get inside. Once they were both inside, Lot closed the door and locked every single lock himself. Once the door was sealed, he rested against it and heaved a heavy sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his brow.
Don't tell me you brought strangers into this house,
Otto hissed.
I couldn't leave them in the streets at the mercy of the Sodomites,
Lot replied.
They'll kill us for this. Can they at least kill me after dinner?
Lot asked.
My guests are likely as hungry as I am. Where are the girls? In the house,
Otto replied.
Maleb, Shua,
Lot called out. At this, 2 young women hastened through the house at Lot's command. They bowed before him, but as soon as they saw the strangers, they covered their faces and giggled into their hands.
Don't stand there giggling,
Lot chided.
We have guests. Help your mother prepare 3 cakes of bread for us.
We're out of salt, Otto replied.
Out of salt?
Lot asked incredulously.
We live only a stone's throw away from Mount Sodom. Go get some salt already and be quick about it. My guests are waiting.
No need to rush on our account, the clean-faced stranger said.
Yes,
the bearded one added. We shall accept a little water first.
Very well,
Lot said.
I'll have the servants bring water to wash your feet for you. Maleb and Shua will begin preparing food while Otto buys salt for the bread.
Otto cursed Lot and went off on her way out of the house. She stopped at the door, unfastened the locks, and departed. Once she left, Lot closed the door and locked every lock behind her. He then saw to his guests. They spoke very little, despite Lot's attempts to initiate conversation with them. The servants brought out the basins of water and, at Lot's command, washed the feet of the strangers. By and by, Otto returned with the salt. As soon as the sound of knocking was heard at the door, Lot rushed to the door and opened the portal to see who it was. When he saw his wife looking back at him, he unfastened the locks and let her inside.
Did you meet anyone on your way to the market?
Lot asked.
Did anyone talk to you? Did anyone ask you about these men? Were you followed, woman?
No, she exclaimed in frustration.
By Queen Bearers, shh, not in front of our guests.
Lot shushed.
Calm yourself, Lot,
she demanded.
I wasn't followed. If you're so paranoid, maybe you shouldn't have brought them into the house in the first place.
Pardon me, the bearded stranger said. If there is something amiss, we can leave. Yes, the clean-faced one added. We don't wish to be an inconvenience to you, or to put you in danger.
No, there's no inconvenience at all,
Lot replied.
Only, as I have made abundantly clear, we must be cautious in the city.
Now then, where were we? Oh yes, Otto, take the salt and make the bread already. Shua, Maleb, see what fresh food you can find for our guests. The women went about their work as Lot attended to his guests. They were as quiet as before, sharing glances with each other and saying not a word to Lot. By and by the food was brought out, and they all ate, but not before the strangers offered a prayer of thanks to the Most High God. This done, they dove into the food presented to them.
You know of the Eternal?
Lot asked. The bearded one nodded, amid plucking grapes from a flat cluster. We're surprised that you remember him as well.
Oh, of course I remember the Eternal,
Lot replied.
Ever since the war with the 5 kings, I can't get him out of my mind. He led my lord uncle to victory against overwhelming numbers. And skilled warriors, all of them. That Hezekiah slew giants. And his army defeated the armies of Nimrod, though they were outmatched themselves. The people hereabouts say that my lord uncle must be a giant himself in order to drive the Elamites before him as he did.
The 2 strangers chuckled to themselves.
I suppose it goes without saying that they do not recognize the Most High here in Sodom,
the clean-faced one asked.
Of course not,
Lot sighed.
Recognizing the Eternal would mean they would have to give up the desires of their hearts, and this they would never do. They laugh at all the stories of Abram's victories, and call them the deluded fantasies of ignorant goatherds, and go on about their business just the same as before.
They do not believe the report of how the Most High led Abraham in the past? The bearded man asked.
Who?
Lot answered. Abraham, the bearded man repeated. "The one you knew as Abram. His name is Abraham now." "Indeed?" Lot asked. "I've never heard that. Then again, it has been many years since the War of the Five Kings. There have been no messages from his camp arrived in Sodom." "Is that so?" the clean-faced one asked. "Abraham told us that he has sent many messengers to Sodom, but has not heard any reply from you." Lot looked at them with a suspicious glare. "Have you been talking with my lord, uncle?" "We've just come from his camp at Shechem this noon," the bearded man replied. Lot frowned at these words and continued eating in silence, unwilling to ask the strangers anything about Abraham. He had to be coaxed back into finishing the question the bearded one asked him. "Do not the people of Sodom believe the report of how the Most High has led Abraham in the past?" he repeated. Lot asked, turning to the bearded man. "Oh, well, it wouldn't matter if they did or not. If they did believe it, they would defy the Eternal out of spite." The meal continued in relative silence. As it became apparent that there was nothing else to talk about, and the strangers had almost finished their meals, Lot announced that he would prepare beds for them to sleep in his house. Lot had the servants turn down rooms for them to sleep in, the same two servants who had attended their foot washing. "Did you not leave the camp of Abraham with great wealth?" the clean-faced stranger asked. "Where are your other servants?" "I've had to sell many of my goods, both man and beast," Lot replied, "to sate the greed of the Sodomites. I dare not think about what has become of them in their hands." Just then, there was a loud pounding at the door of Lot's house. From the guest rooms, Lot made his way to the main courtyard where his wife Ada was looking through the porthole. A pale, ghastly expression was upon her face as she turned back to him. "There's a mob outside our house, Lot," she hissed. "I told you not to bring those two into our house. Now they'll kill and molest us, all because of you." "How could they know we had anyone over here?" Lot whispered. "Are you sure that no one asked about you? About us?" "No one asked me anything," she returned. "You didn't accidentally let slip that we had guests? No. Oh, wait, I may have mentioned that when I went to purchase all." "You did what?" "Don't look at me, Lot. It wasn't my fault. You probably weren't as clever as you thought you were, sneaking about town with those two strangers in tow." At that, there was another pounding upon the door from outside. Then came the voices, loud cries, many of them drunk, calling out for those within the house.
"Open up, Hebrew! We know you're in there. We know you brought strangers with you into the city. That's against the law."
"Wait here," Lot said to Otto. "I'll try to get rid of them." Lot unbolted the door, then stepped outside onto the top step. Otto closed the door behind him and locked one of the bolts, but not all of them. Lot's heart sank at the sound, but more so at the motley crew that gathered before his house. There were men, women, and children of all ages, as well as some who were a little in between, men and women, who had so disfigured themselves that they looked indistinguishable from the opposite sex. There were some who were borne upon litters, for they were so fat that they could not properly carry themselves on their own 2 feet. Some of them still had food stains dripping from between their lips. Some of those in the crowd even had weapons, be it as little as a staff, or as great as a small battering ram. "Good evening, my friends," Lot greeted. "Wherefore have you called at my house at so late an hour?"
"Don't play the fool with us, Hebrew,"
a very fat man challenged, taking a step up the stairs towards Lot.
"We know that you brought strangers into the city against the laws of the great queen."
He gestured to a very effeminate man behind him, who was wielding a club, wearing a dress and had a scowl upon his face, heavily marked with gold and silver rings.
"My husband over here heard your wife say in the marketplace that you ran out of salt on account of strangers that were in your house.
Bring them out, Hebrew, a rather disgusting-looking woman demanded. She was overweight and had shaved most of her hair off her head, save for the front hemisphere and the back hemisphere, which had been dyed red.
You know the law, Lot, the fat man stated. No stranger may enter into the city of Sodom unless he has been made the sport of the people of the city.
Lot's face blanched at these words being thrown back to him. Into his mind, which but a few hours ago was talking of his uncle Abraham, came the stories of the old world which Abraham had told him since his return to Ur, almost a jubilee ago. "Let us have our way with them," the red-haired woman shouted. "Bring the strangers out so that we may know them," a woman with large piercing eyes added in chorus.
So, what do you say, lawkeeper? The fat man asked. Will you uphold the law? Will you let us know these strangers intimately?
"Please, my brethren," Lot exclaimed, stretching out his arms against his door, as he had to the strangers when they told him that they would remain in the streets. "The God of Abraham destroy the generation of the great flood in consequence of such sins as you desire to commit, and you would revert to them. I pray that you do not do so wickedly." "We defy Abraham and his God," the red-haired woman shouted, which sent cheers of approval and loud curses against Abraham and the Eternal from the crowd. "We would have our way with Abraham if he were here," the bug-eyed woman added.
Would you defy the laws of Sodom, Lot? The fat man asked, taking a step closer to the door. The laws that the gatekeepers before you would have faithfully administered.
"You want someone?" Lot asked, tears streaming down from his eyes, and as his voice cracked, he feared the evil that he perceived in the hearts through their dark eyes. "Take my 2 daughters, Maleb and Shua, virgins both of them. I beg you, let me bring them out to you and do what you wish to them. But these men are under my protection." "Aha!" the red-haired woman exclaimed. "You admit that you have strangers inside. Stand back or we'll trample you down to get to them." "Wait," the effeminate man spoke up, in the deep voice of a man, pointing at Lot. "This one fellow came into our land to sojourn, and now he has set himself up as a judge over us."
Is that so?
The fat man challenged, taking another step closer to Lot. He was now on the step below him and seized Lot by the throat and pushed him up against the door of his own house.
Very well. Since you defy the Queen, the law, and the people of Sodom, now we'll have our way with you as well.
"And we'll do worse to you than to those men," the effeminate man threatened, leaning in and licking Lot's cheek. Lot made a disgusting coughing noise but was unable to free himself. "Break down the door," the bug-eyed woman shouted. They were now on the steps or climbing up the masonry to get hold of the house and break their way inside. Lot was now up against the door as the fat man and his effeminate husband were pawing at him. It seemed impossible for Lot to escape the perverted will of the Sodomites. What happened next was so fast that it seemed like a blur in Lot's mind. Something very powerful opened the door behind Lot and pulled him inside. Then he saw the clean-faced stranger revealed in its true form, with eyes ablaze with white fire. The fat man and his effeminate husband cowered before the fiery face of the angel and seemed to be stunned in their place. Then the door was shut fast and the light vanished, and the clean-faced stranger seemed little different than he had been before. "You... what are you?" Lot breathed. "We are servants of the Most High God, son of Haran," the bearded man replied. "And we have come to destroy the cities of the plain, including Sodom and Gomorrah." "Destroy Sodom?" Lot asked in shocked disbelief. "But why?" "You have seen the wickedness of the city firsthand for 24 years, the clean-faced one replied. "The cry of this wickedness has waxed great. even unto the Most High in heaven. Therefore we have come down to destroy the cities of the plain."
"Oh no,"
Lot bemoaned.
"As it was in the days of Noah," the bearded man continued, "so it shall be now. Tell me, do you have anyone else here besides yourself? Sons, daughters, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law?"
"Yes," Lot nodded, still agape at what he was hearing.
"Gather your family and bring them out," the bearded one ordered.
"But what about the mob?" Lot asked, gesturing to the door.
"They will not harm you," the bearded one said. "They have been stricken with blindness and cannot find themselves, much less the door to your house. Come, let us go and save those who cannot be saved while there is yet time."
He then approached Lot and offered him his hand. Lot took his hand and was hoisted up onto his feet easily. No sooner had Lot appeared to his feet, but he saw that Addo, Maleb, and Shua were standing in the courtyard, woken by the sounds of the mob.
"Well," he asked, "what are you waiting for? Pack your things, we're leaving."
Before they had a chance to utter a word of protest or questioning, the bearded angel took Lot by the hand and led him out of his house. True to what he had said, the street outside was filled with a mob of blind men and women, fumbling about, reaching out with their hands. With the angel at his side, Lot made his way at an eager run to the house of Segur's friends, where they were feasting in celebration. Without bothering to tell the servant at the door to announce him, he ran into the house, into the midst of the festivities. There were, of course, several small orgies happening at several tables, and people wandering about stained in wine in various stages of undress. Lot found the groom's table and ran to the side of his son. Segur seemed not to notice his father, even as he waved at him and pulled on his coat. Frustration was filling up in Lot's body, and he stood up on one of the tables and stamped with his foot and called with a loud voice,
"Hear me!"
Those who were busy paused for a moment to take stock of what was happening.
"Who is this that dares to interrupt our celebrations?" the groom asked. "I am Lot, son of Haran," the old man replied, "and I am here for my son. Segur, up with you." "Don't worry, everyone," Segur spoke to the others. "My lord father is drunk with old wine." This elicited many mocking laughs from those around them as they continued with their merrymaking. "I said get up!" Lot demanded, reaching down and taking hold of his son's coat. "We must leave this place." "Leave?" Segur asked. "But it's only midnight." Come, my lord father, have some wine." "There's no time," Lot retorted. "The eternal God will destroy this city." Segur laughed. "You don't seriously believe those mad fables of that ignorant goat herder? What was that you used to call him? Oh, yes, a sterile old mule." "This is serious, Segur," Lot retorted. "We have to leave before the city is destroyed." "Destroyed?" Segur returned. "The Elamites couldn't destroy us. An army of giants couldn't destroy the city of Sodom. Even if that God of your uncle's was real, he couldn't destroy the city of Sodom." "Don't say such things," Lot chided. "And why not?" Segur asked, rising from his place. Lot placed his hands upon his son's shoulders, but Segur took Lot by the neck and brought him over to a balcony that looked out over the city of Sodom. "Look at that, my lord father," Segur said, gesturing with his wine cup to the city. "You hear the sound of music? Flutes, cymbals, and trumpets resound with the glory of feasting and revelry. Everything continues as they have since the beginning. And you speak of destruction, doom and gloom." "Segur, listen to me," Lot replied, his wrath rising in his chest. "I am your father, and I order you to leave this party and pack your things." "I am not yours to order around any more, my lord fool," Segur retorted. He then turned to his companions. "Behold, my lord fool has come as a court jester to play sport for our entertainment." Loud peals of raucous laughter erupted from those around,
and Segur joined once again in the feasting. Lot was about to say something to him, but the bearded angel placed a hand on his shoulder.
"We must go,"
he told him.
"I have to try harder," Lot replied. I can't leave him here." "He has made his choice," the angel replied. "The lusts of Sodom are more important to him than the commands of the Most High. Now you must make your choice, Lot, before it is too late. Are there any others in the city?"
Lot paused amid the chaos of the party and shook his head.
"We must return to your house," the angel said. No, I have to try again." "There's nothing you can do, Lot.
There has to be something."
"Why do you persist?"
"Because he's my son and heir."
"If you remain," the bearded angel replied, "you shall die with your son and heir. Now let us be off."
The bearded angel led the way back to Lot's house, though Lot was shedding tears from his eyes. Every step forward became harder, for it felt as though he was forsaking his family. It had seemed so much easier to leave Terah and Nahor back in Padan when he sought his fortune with his uncle Abraham, back when he was called Abram. Now, however, he was not seeking fortune. He was going from danger into more danger. At last, too soon for Lot's liking, they arrived back at the house of Lot. The door opened without any resistance, and Lot saw the clean-faced angel standing beside Ado, Shua, and Maleb. They were dressed, but stood about, looking fearful. There were no supplies or packs around them. Ado's face was looking at the ground in sorrow, and Shua and Maleb had their faces buried in their hands, and wailed with many tears.
"Why are they not ready?"
the bearded angel asked as they entered the courtyard of the house.
"They are afraid,"
the clean-faced angel replied.
"Why do you fear?"
the bearded angel asked.
"You will not die. You will be saved from the destruction."
"Please, my lord, I beg you,"
Lot cried, throwing himself at the feet of the two angels.
"Have mercy. Is the Most High so cruel that he will not show mercy to the cities of the plain? Is he so bloodthirsty that he must destroy everyone who does not bow before him?"
"Hitherto,"
the bearded angel said, looking down at Lot,
"you could have interceded on behalf of the cities of the plain. Yet all this time you extolled to us their great sins. And now that they have threatened to violate the servants of the Most High, you may no longer intercede for them."
"Your uncle Abraham interceded before the Almighty on their behalf," the clean-faced angel added, "and we could not even find 10 righteous people in all of the 5 cities of the plain. Only you, your wife, and your 2 daughters.
"We must leave now," the bearded angel insisted. "There is no time."
"The fires of judgment will not hold forever," warned the clean-faced angel.
"Please spare the city,"
Lot begged.
"Let the Most High show mercy."
Lot continued to beg, grovel, and whine at the feet of the angels, asking repeatedly that they should show mercy to the cities of the plain. But they had ceased to listen to his pleas. With only a single silent nod to each other, suddenly the bearded angel seized Ado by the collar of her robe, while the clean-faced one took hold of Maleb and Shua by their garments.
"What are you doing?"
Lot began, but his words were cut short as the right hand of the bearded angel seized him by his robes as well.
"We are showing you mercy,"
the bearded angel shouted. "You leave us no choice but to drag you out before your indecision damns you to the fires of destruction," the clean-faced angel added. The 2 angels dragged Lot, Ado, Maleb, and Shua back out of the city the way Lot had brought them in. Every step of the way, the 4 of them cried and whined and protested about the rough way that the angels handled them. Yet neither did they listen nor entertain the petulant whining and excuses of the 4 Hebrews. In their madness, Shua and Maleb cried out for help from the people they passed by. But those who were not struck blind and unable to help them thought that they had been taken in some mischief, and so laughed them to scorn. Little did any of them realize the magnitude of what was about to happen. At last, they passed outside of the city gates, past the Sphinx and the ziggurat. They then set their faces northward, and followed the road apace until it came to the northern walls. It was still dark, and morning was some hours away. In the glowing lights of the city behind them, Lot found himself, Ado, Maleb, and Shua, thrown unceremoniously forward towards the mountains to the west.
"Escape for thy lives!"
the bearded angel commanded them. "Look not behind thee," the clean-faced angel ordered, "neither stay at all in the plain of Jordan." "Escape to the mountains, lest thou be consumed," the two angels ordered at once with a loud voice.
"Please, I beg you,"
Lot begged, keeping his face forward to the north and in the dust.
"Go now,"
the bearded angel commanded.
"The day will soon be upon you, and then comes destruction." "If I go into the mountains, some great evil will take me and I shall die," Lot said. "Please, if I have found favor in your eyes, show even further favor to me, and let me flee into the city of Bela. It is not far, and it is small, and perhaps not as bad as Sodom or Gomorrah."
"Go then,"
the bearded angel replied, "and make haste, for we can do nothing until you go there."
"This little city shall not be destroyed," the clean-faced angel said, "for the Most High has accepted your petition. But you must go now."
"And whatever you do," said the bearded angel, "look not behind thee,"
the two said in unison. Just then there was a burst of fire as the two angels returned once more into the heavens. But the sound, light, and heat made Lot fear that destruction had already come to the city. This urged him on at the last to act and not to waste any more time.
"Well, what are you waiting for?"
Lot asked.
"Run!"
Rising from his feet, Lot helped Otto and the girls up onto their feet. Eagerly he had them go before him, that they might not be consumed by the fire. In this formation, they began to run north towards Bela. It was not as near as Lot had said, but on the northern side of the plain of Jordan, even as Sodom was on the southern end thereof. They had a long run ahead of themselves to reach the city of Bela, which would afterwards be called Zoar, for being saved on account of its smallness. Many hours passed as they ran north towards Bela in the dead of night. Morning was still many hours off, yet they were filled with fear over the impending doom. Lot was old and weary, for he had had no sleep, and the long journey was wearing on him. Shua and Maleb were young, and had the strength of youth on their side. As for Ado, she was going slowly, but not necessarily by reason of weariness. "This is absurd," she exclaimed. "To be dragged out of our beloved city in the middle of the night and thrown into the desert to die? It's barbaric."
"We have to keep going," Lot urged. "We must escape."
"Escape from what?" Ado asked. "Civilization? From the place where my beloved Peltith is buried and where Sigur remains behind?" She then stopped in her tracks, as if to catch her breath.
"Why are we stopping?" Lot asked. "We must go on."
"No, Lot," Ado gasped. "We left Abram's tent to seek civilization. I am not forsaking it again so easily." With that, she began to turn on her heels right before Lot's very eyes.
"No, Ado, don't!" Lot cried out. "No!"
Too late. She looked back at the city behind them. A loud cry of pain was heard in Otto's voice, and then a crackling of calcification, and then a deathly silence.
"Mother!"
Maleb and Shua cried out, one after the other. But Lot was too horrified and grief-stricken for words. All he could do was sob quietly to himself, tears streaming down his face as his lips quivered. His hands reached out towards where Otto once stood and felt the coarse, granular touch of sand upon his fingertips. No, not sand, for there was hardly any sand on the shores of the lowest point on the earth. It was salt. Lot let out a cry and sank down to his knees. No longer would he hear Otto's voice or feel the warmth and softness of her touch upon his cheek. There was now nothing left for him but a pillar of salt, unmoving, unfeeling, and dead. For many long minutes they remained there, at the feet of the pillar of salt, in weeping and profound lamentation. As if to stir them once more on their way, there was a distant rumble of thunder in the sky directly above them. Lot was the first one to rise, and took Malav and Shua by the hand, and began to run northward, urging them over and over again through hot tears.
Don't look back. Don't look back for anything. Even if your Lord Father stumbles and falls, you keep on running. Whatever you do, don't look back. I cannot bear to lose my wife and my 2 daughters in one day. Please don't look back.
Dawn came over the Sea of Salt. In the east, the sun rose up from the ruinous desert mountains. Upon the cities of the plain, no sun rose, for a cloud of darkness passed over them, cutting off the light of the sun. For those within the cities, they would never see another sunrise again. Lightning crashed, and thunder roared from dark clouds, striking fear into the hearts of those people. A most loathsome rain came down upon those cities from the dark clouds overhead. Sulphurous balls wreathed in purplish flame began to descend in great waves upon the cities. Whatever they touched began to burn in small fires here and there, emitting an intense, hideous odor of brimstone. More began to fall in a great fiery storm, increasing the ambient heat within the cities. Smoke began to rise from the many burning places throughout the city. This was more than enough to choke many of the people to death. For them, this was the more humane way of going. As the heat began to rise, the fires burned hotter and brighter, sending masses of varicolored fires raging up into the sky. Those who were unfortunate enough to get caught in the early part of the blaze suffered tremendously. Those who tried to battle the smoke were caught by the now many times hotter fires, which melted metal, stone, cloth, and flesh almost instantly. By now a great inferno had erupted on the shores of the Sea of Salt. Sodom was caught up in the fire, and a lethal shower of burning sulfur poured down upon Gomorrah as well. Farther north, Admah and Zeboim fell to the same fire as the dark cloud stretched its way northward. The intense heat not only scorched the cities, but caught fire to the green land around them as well. So great was that fire and the noxious rain that fell upon those cities that all life in the area was devoured. The valley around the Sea of Salt was made barren and lifeless. Almost no trace of the green fecund land remained, the land that had attracted Lot some 24 years ago. Far and away, Abraham and Eleazar were on their journey eastward. After the incident with the 3 angels, Abraham hoped to see the fate of those cities. In his heart, he wished that he would see nothing, that the angels of destruction had found 10 righteous souls in those cities, and all would be well. Yet as he came to the top of the ridge, he could see in the distance a great pillar of black smoke rising to the heights of the heavens. Immediately he urged his camel down and fell to the ground, a great fear falling upon him. Once he was on the ground, he bowed himself down and wept bitterly.
Not even 10 could be found, he wept. Surely Lot is dead.
At that moment, the form of Metatron appeared before him. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked at the angel.
What has become of my brother's son? He asked. Is Lot among the dead?
Not so,
Metatron replied.
He begged us to let him stay in Bela in the north. He feared for his life and to not be ashamed by returning to your camp.
But surely he won't stay in that city, Abraham replied. That cloud of smoke covers the whole plain of Jordan. He will surely be lost. Please, for my sake, let Lot be spared.
The Most High has heard your pleas,
Metatron stated.
Therefore do not be afraid. Lot shall not die in the overthrow of the cities of the plain.
Miles away, the people of Bela were in fear for their lives of the looming black cloud of destruction coming up from the south. The thunder and lightning from the midst thereof shook the whole valley, and there was an infernal glow of fire beneath those clouds in the earth. They all feared that the end of the world had come upon them. As for Lot, he and his daughters had arrived at the break of day and had, after much negotiating, purchased a place for themselves with some of the golden jewelry of Moab and Shua. Yet Lot was in profound grief from the loss of Addo and the loss of Sodom, and upon him and his daughters the fear of destruction was still heavy. Shua, the youngest one, had given her earrings for a jug of wine, which she offered to her father to cheer his spirits, but he refused to drink. As the dawn rose upon them, the cloud of destruction began to rise and blow its way north. Lot still feared to look back, but now a new fear came into his mind. He doubted that the Eternal would keep his promise, but instead chose to destroy Bela as well. Therefore, while the throes of destruction were still heavy upon the land, he turned to his daughters.
"We must go."
"Go where?" Moab the eldest asked him.
"Into the mountains," Lot answered. "This storm won't stop until it's destroyed the whole valley. We're not safe here."
"But the angel said we could stay here," Shua pleaded. "Lord Father, you asked them to let us stay here." "You said that we would fall to some mischief in the wilderness and die," Moab replied. "Why leave when we're at least safe here in Bela?"
"Be silent!"
Lot shouted. His daughters balked from him, looking at him with fear.
"You weren't there to see my lord father Haran burned alive in the fire of Nimrod. Better a swift death by a wild beast or Amorite than to burn in the overthrow of the cities of the plain."
They didn't have many things with them, having left in such a hurry from the city of Sodom. Therefore, they did not need to have as much time as before to depart. The three of them left Bela going east across the Jordan River. There was a ford, and the river was thankfully shallow at this point. Lot urged them on, grim and resolute. Moab and Shua were crying as they went. They feared that Lot had gone mad to abandon his former stance and send them off into exile. More than that, none of them could remember much of their lives with Abraham. Even Moab, who was born as they were in Mizraim, had no recollection of those days. To them, Sodom and Gomorrah were the entire world. Now that world was being destroyed, and there was nowhere left for them to go. For many hours they walked as the fires continued to burn in the lands around them. From the east, they came into the rugged high mountains over the plain of Jordan on the eastern side. It seemed that they were getting nowhere, and that the fires were only continuing to spread. At last, however, they found themselves a cave somewhere high up, relatively away from wild beasts. Barely had they come to the threshold of the cave when Lot, out of shape from living in the lap of luxury in Sodom, and wearied by grief, having walked almost non-stop for 1 day and 1 night, collapsed. Moab and Shua carried him the rest of the way and leaned him against the wall of the cave. As he lay there, a broken old man, gasping for breath, his 2 daughters, their faces stained with coal running down their tear-stained cheeks, spoke to each other. "Shua," Moab said to her sister, "the whole world is burning below us, and there are no men left but our Lord Father, and he is an old man. If he dies, then there shall be no more seed upon the earth." "What shall we do?" Shua asked. "Do you have the wine with you?" Moab asked. "Of course I do," Shua replied. "It was gotten at a high price, and if it were all that's left of this earth, it is worth more than all the gold in Sodom." "When he comes back around," Moab said, "we'll get him good and drunk. Then we'll sleep with him one after the other. That way we'll bear children and keep alive the seed of man upon the earth." Shua agreed to this plan. It wasn't very untoward in their minds. After all, they had heard tell of much worse vices than these in the cities of Sodom, though they were both virgins. Furthermore, they were of the foolish belief that Sodom and Gomorrah were the entire world, which was now up in flames. So it was that they urged their weary father back into waking and gave him wine to drink. And so began the nefarious deed upon which they had set their hearts. Only 3 righteous ones left in Sodom, and none of them were very righteous at all. Over and over they gave wine to their father in quick succession until he became a drooling old fool and collapsed onto the bare earth floor of the cave. But while Maleb set about on her purpose, thinking that these three were the only humans left on Earth, their nefarious deeds had not gone unnoticed. The story continues in Chapter 19.